So in this video, I'm going to be exploring another resource for reading comprehension. This resource is called ReadWorks. It's a free online resource that teachers can use to help their comprehension and vocabulary instruction in their classroom. If you've ever used something like Newsela, it's a little bit similar to that. I personally haven't used Newsela from a teacher's point of view, just from a student's point of view, but I think this website would be particularly useful for teachers to be able to monitor students' progress and control what their students are working on, see specific data about how their students are doing, and create more differentiated instruction. So I'm going to go ahead and get into it. This is the teacher's view. So as you can see, I've made a classroom. You can make a classroom from scratch, or you can integrate a classroom from Google Classroom. I don't use Google Classroom personally, so I didn't do that, but I know a lot of people use that resource, and it's pretty popular and useful. So I created a classroom. It just asked me to name it. It asked me the grade level of students, and then it started asking me to add students. Obviously, I'm just doing this myself, so I added myself as a student. So this is where you would see all of your students under the roster. Over here is the groups section. If I wanted to make student groups, say I wanted to differentiate instruction, because one of the things you can do in this site is assign different level text, which we'll get deeper into in a little bit. But if I wanted to create student groups based on ability level, I could do that. Or if I was going to have students work on this in the classroom together, I could make heterogeneous groups if I wanted students to help each other out, that sort of thing. So I could find that there, and that's as easy as clicking create a group and selecting the students you want to be in the group. Now over here is the student library. Again, we'll get into this a little bit more, but this is where all of the passages will show up that are catered to your students specifically. You can enable or disable student library for this class, just depending on if you want your students to be able to only view the assigned text that you give them, or if you want them to be able to explore different texts freely. So the first thing I'm going to do is pop over to the content tab. And these are all the different texts that are available at ReadWorks. There's a lot to explore, and there's a lot of different ways to categorize the texts. So you can categorize things by content type. There's all different kinds of passages and resources for reading. There's ebooks, which are just physical literature like you'd have in the classroom. I think I saw little like chapter books like Junie B. Jones, that kind of thing, that's available on this website, passages from those texts. There's step reads, which is differentiation. So for example, if I clicked on this, it would show you all the different options for this. And these are texts that you can change the lexile level so that you can differentiate between texts. If you wanted to assign the same text to all your students, but wanted them at a slightly different level, based on if your students were high ability or needed extra support or were at grade level, you could do that with step reads. It's also a good way to progress with repeated reading. So if you wanted students to read the same text over and over, either for fluency reasons or anything else, once they've mastered one lexile level of text, you could upgrade it to the next one. So if we remove that, there's article a day sets if you want this to be something that you implement in the classroom daily. And then different kinds of articles for that. There's collections for English language learners. There's paired texts. So if you wanted to do an assignment where students have to compare and contrast two different texts, which is an element of comprehension, paired text is a really nice resource to do that. And then there's also book studies, which are in-depth studies. If you were, say, if you were reading Persepolis in the classroom, you could assign one of these to support that comprehension. So, uncheck this. There's also options that have audio. If your student has a reading disability or just needs really intensive support, you can add in the audio narration. There's activity types, which we'll see a little bit later, but each assignment will have different kinds of questions associated with it, so this just depends on what you're wanting for your classroom. You can filter by grade level and topic, especially if you wanted to integrate lessons across units and across subjects. Say I wanted to target a science standard and an English standard at the same time. This would be useful for that. Special collections is just really useful for targeting specific needs if you want to capture students' interest with holiday and events, or if your student really benefits from social emotional learning. those are good resources for that. You can choose the text type, and then this is also really useful. You can select the word count and the lexile level by just clicking and dragging. And you can do range, or you can drag them together to make a specific number. So say I wanted to create or select a random passage for my third graders, maybe lexile level up to, 650. So it would give me all the options for that. I could sort by the different content types and such if I wanted to, but I'll just go ahead and pick For the Love of Dogs. So when you open up the text, you'll have the audio narration if your students could use that, and then the text as it's shown here. The words in blue you can click on and it will pull up a dictionary definition of it and the word used in an example. Sorry, I just used a lot of likes and ums in that little section. But it will pull up that to help students comprehend. And then over here, you can see the vocabulary activity. I won't get too much into this because obviously this is targeting vocabulary more than comprehension, but almost every passage here does have a corresponding vocabulary activity that can be done with students. But if we go over to the question set, this just has a standard question set for comprehension. There's questions that are like right there in the text. There's questions that give you a passage and have you infer or draw conclusions from the text. There's like this question that asks you to make comparisons, that sort of thing. So I definitely recommend looking over the questions before you just assign the text, just so you know that it is targeting something that would be useful to your students. And then also gives you suggestions for related texts. If you, again, want to do the comparison and contrast, if your student has a special interest, say they love dogs, you want to assign them more things about dogs, that would maybe be a useful resource. So over here, just some more details about the text, the grade level, the word level, or the word count, the lexile level, and the genre. So say I wanted to use this resource. I could click Assign, and I could choose to assign it to the whole class or specific students. So obviously I just have me in here. But if I had different students, I could select specific ones. But I'm just going to do it to the whole class for now. You can choose whether or not the audio is included if you want students to be able to listen to the audio or if you want them to try to read it on their own. You can choose to not or to assign the vocabulary activity. I'm going to not click that because we're just focusing on comprehension for today. And then obviously click this. And you can pick the assignment date, so when it'll show up. So if you wanted to sit down and assign a unit's worth of texts, you could have them wait to show up until a certain date, and then the due date. So all you have to do is click Assign, and then it looks like it's worked. So we'll go ahead and click Go to Assignments, and this is up here right under the Assignments and Progress tabs. So as I was playing around with this earlier, I did have some other assignments I was working with. But as you can see, we have the assignment that I just had, and it tells you whether or not students have submitted the assignment, the due dates if you need reminders of that. I did have, for example, this past assignment that I went through and completed from the student view, and it shows you that it's been submitted. You can click on the settings to extend the due date and the assignment, hide results, that sort of thing. And then these are just some extra resources. So if you click on student progress, it tells you for the month, whatever they worked on, their personal progress. So it says how many passages they've read, and then it would tell you the library passages if you give them access to that, literary passages, what they've read, and then some more specific details here. And then if you go to the book of knowledge, this is another way that you can assign articles a day. So if you watch this video, it's a more in-depth introduction, but basically this allows your students to, as it says, create a book of knowledge, read about specific things, and then it will all show up here. Okay, so if I go to my tools, this is a good way if you want to get more in depth with the site. There's a bunch of tutorials that shows you exactly how to use everything on the site. So that was very helpful to me. And from here, I might look a little bit more at the content, and then we'll jump over to the student view. So just real quick, I wanted to pop over to the content area and explain the different activity types. So there's full question set, which is just kind of what we showed earlier. If I pop in here, I can see it really fast, but it just gives you 5 different questions about the text. That's sort of comprehensive. It just overviews the entire text. There's not really a specific skill being targeted. It's just making sure that you understand. So if we go back here and uncheck that, there's also express question set, which are designed to scaffold learning and questions. So each question will build on each other, and you use prior knowledge about the text to answer those questions. So again, they look pretty much the same format-wise, but the content will be a bit different depending on what you're trying to target. So it takes you through the processes, it gets into details, and then it, at the end, will ask you what the whole main idea is. If we go back, we can see there are open-ended questions. So for these questions, students will be asked to give a written response. So if I clicked on this one, students would have to write the answer. And I should also mention, we'll see this in the student view, but you can go back and look in the passage for answers. So if you wanted written responses to hear students' own perspectives and voices rather than just multiple choice, that might give you a deeper understanding of your students' understanding. And then these activity types let you really hone in on a specific skill. So if I wanted to do inferring, obviously these are questions where it's not going to be right there in the text. You're using text clues to infer something. So that might be a little bit of a higher level skill. But you can you can specify the author's purpose, figurative language, inferred information, main idea, theme, voice, depending on what you're targeting. If we need to do monitoring, so again, monitoring your thinking, comparing and contrasting, that sort of thing. So you can pick an assignment that helps your students classify and categorize, compare and contrast, identify explicit information, and fact versus opinion. And then the text structure question set has targeted skills such as cause and effect, character, genre, plot structure, setting, sequence, that sort of thing. And you can pick these things if you want to get really specific. Say I wanted to focus on setting. If I was working on that specifically, there's some written text and there's some multiple choice, but there will be questions specifically about the setting. All right. Now we're going to pop over to the student. All right, so this is my student view. It'll just pull up my classes. Obviously, I'm in just one class right now. So I'd click on that class, and then it has all of my to-do assignments. And if I can click over, I can also check on my submitted assignments. I can view the results. So again, it'll show me the passage again, and then the questions. And I can click on results to see what I got wrong and what I got correct, and review that. So if I click on one of my to-do assignments, this is what it looks like from the student view. They can change the text size if that's something they need for accommodation. They can have the passage and the questions pop up side by side if they do need to look back in the text pretty often. And then they can also make it full screen. So that's just some extra stuff for accessibility. So the students could read the passage. They can click on the vocabulary terms to get a better definition. And then they pop over to questions. So I can just click randomly. And then it tells me when it's been submitted. So I can just go back to my assignments. It also gives this suggestion of more passages in the library, because I have, from the teacher view, I have the library enabled, so that's something the students can access. And then I can view my results. So what I got wrong, what I got right. So the student view is pretty simple. Since I do have access to the library, I can click on that and I can explore different text. If the teacher was just like, I want you guys to get on ReadWorks, find something to read, answer a few questions, that sort of thing. They can explore this on their own. So that is pretty much what there is to the student view, being able to do structured assignments and explore the classroom library. So the last thing I'll show you, if I come back to the teacher view, I can see that this assignment has been submitted. And if I click on it, it will tell me who submitted it. Obviously, if I had more students, they would all show up here and I could compare their answers. You can view it by student or by question, so you can see what students answered for each question, and sort of compare and contrast what areas did students have a common misconception in, what were a lot of students struggling with versus one student. If you wanted to do intervention for little groups of students that have problems with the same skills, or if you wanted to do like a whole group reteaching, if all of your students struggle with one specific skill, such as identifying theme or looking back in the text, that sort of thing. But one thing that's also really nice is that you can add comments and feedback, which I feel like is very important as a teacher. It's something that motivates me personally as a student. But you can comment on why the question was incorrect. So sort of like explain that to them. This is why you got this wrong. This is what you can do differently next time, that sort of thing. And if you wanted to give your students feedback and then give them a chance to redo it, you can choose to reassign. Or if you think a student just rushed through it, you can reassign it. So that is ReadWorks. Again, I think it's a pretty useful tool, not for main instruction, but supplementary instruction or online instruction that allows you to assign students text based on what their needs, their skill level, their lexile level, their interests, and also monitor their data and their progress.